My family caused a scene because I gave my old car to my divorced sister to help her out. She threw the keys down and yelled, "You have to give me your new car instead. So if they don't appreciate my gift, they'll be left with nothing at all." Things really blew up with my family after I offered my old car to my divorced sister to help her out. She just threw the keys back at me and insisted I had to give her my new car. My attitude was, if they didn't appreciate my gift, then they could just go without. My name is Chloe, and until about a year ago I thought I had a fairly typical family. I'm 32 years old and work as a sales manager at North Star Construction. I've always been the responsible one, the kid who followed all the rules, got good grades, and landed a secure job. My older sister, Melissa, is 36 and a world apart from me. She married her high school sweetheart, Brad, right out of college and became a full-time mom to their two boys, Tyler and Noah, who are now 12 and 10. I still remember the day Melissa called me, crying so hard I could barely make out her words. Brad had packed his bags and left her for his coworker, Jennifer. Just like that, 15 years of marriage were gone. "He said he hasn't been happy for years, Chloe," she sobbed over the phone. "How could he do this to me and the boys?" That night, I drove over to her place and found her on the kitchen floor, surrounded by tissues. The boys were shut in their rooms, confused and upset. "What am I going to do?" Melissa asked, her eyes swollen and red. "I haven't worked since before Tyler was born. Brad paid for everything. We'll figure it out," I promised, though at that moment, I had no clue what that would entail. It turned out Brad wasn't interested in figuring anything out. He refused to pay child support until Melissa dragged him to court, and even then, the amount was barely enough for groceries. The beautiful suburban house they'd lived in? Brad kept it, since it was his before they got married. "I can help you find an apartment," I offered one afternoon while helping her pack up the house. The boys were with our parents, which was a good thing because Melissa kept breaking down every few minutes. "How am I supposed to pay rent? I have no income, Chloe." That's when I made the offer that would change everything. "I can cover it until you get on your feet." My parents were supportive too. Dad, a retired accountant, and Mom, a former elementary school teacher, immediately stepped in. They'd pick up the boys from school, help with homework, and make sure they had dinner when Melissa started working part-time at a local boutique. For the first few months, things seemed to be manageable. I transferred money to Melissa for rent and occasionally helped with other expenses. I lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, drove a reliable Honda Accord, and made good money at North Star. I figured I could handle helping my sister through a tough time, but as weeks turned into months, something shifted. Instead of working towards independence, Melissa seemed to lean more into being a victim. "Brad ruined my life" became her go-to phrase. I had everything planned out. I was going to be a stay-at-home mom until the boys went to college. Now look at me. I tried to be understanding. Maybe talking to someone would help? I could pay for a therapist. The look she gave me could have frozen lava. "I don't need someone to tell me how to feel, Chloe. I need money to live." Do you have any idea how humiliating it is to work at that store? The manager is 10 years younger than me. Conversations like this became frequent. If I mentioned I was busy, she'd call our parents, who would listen to her vent and validate her anger for hours. Mom would then call me saying, "Your sister is really struggling, honey. She needs us all to be there for her." By the 6-month mark, the financial burden was becoming serious. It wasn't just rent anymore. It was, the boys need new soccer cleats, the refrigerator is making strange noises, and Tyler's math grades are slipping. He needs a tutor. Each request sounded reasonable by itself. How could I say no to my nephews needing school supplies or winter coats? But one night, sitting at my kitchen table with a spreadsheet open on my laptop, I added it all up. I nearly choked on my wine when I saw the total. I was spending almost a third of my monthly income on Melissa and her kids. The next Sunday dinner at my parents' house, I decided to bring it up. We were all there. Mom and Dad, Melissa, the boys, and me. Mom had made her famous pot roast, and everyone was in a decent mood. It seemed like the right time for a tough conversation. "So I've been thinking," I said carefully after we'd finished eating. "It's been almost a year since the divorce. I'm happy to help with rent, but some of the extra expenses are really adding up. Maybe it's time to look for a full-time position." The silence that followed was heavy. "Are you saying you're tired of helping me?" Melissa's voice was dangerously low. "Do you have any idea what I'm going through? The boys are in school all day," I pointed out, gesturing to my nephews, "and Mom and Dad help with pickup. There are jobs with regular business hours that—" "I can't believe you." Melissa stood up so fast her chair nearly fell over. "I'm still recovering from Brad destroying our family, and now you're attacking me too?" "I'm not attacking you, I'm just—" "Come on, boys, we're leaving." She grabbed her purse and signaled to Tyler and Noah, who reluctantly got up, mumbling goodbyes to our parents. The front door slammed so hard the family photos on the wall rattled. I looked at my parents, expecting some understanding. Instead, Dad frowned deeply and Mom shook her head. "How could you be so selfish, Chloe?" Mom asked. "Your sister is a single mother of 2 boys, and you're single with no children. You don't need as much money as she does." I stared at them, stunned. "So I should just bankroll her indefinitely?" That's what being a good sister means. It means not being greedy when your family needs you, Mom said firmly. I realized arguing was pointless. These were the people who had taught me family comes first, but apparently that only applied when I was the one giving. I should go, I said, standing up. Thanks for dinner. As I drove home that night, I felt completely alone for the first time in my life. A week after that disastrous family dinner, my phone buzzed with a message from Melissa. Need $500 for boys' clothes, they've outgrown everything and look terrible, please send today. No hello, no mention of our argument, not even a please, until it was tacked on like an afterthought. I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to refuse, to finally draw a line. But then I thought about Tyler and Noah. It wasn't their fault their mom was behaving this way. I sighed heavily and transferred the money. Melissa's only response was a thumbs-up emoji. I poured myself into a particularly challenging project, securing a contract for a new office complex downtown. The client was known for being difficult, but I spent weeks crafting the perfect pitch. You knocked it out of the park, Chloe, my boss said after we signed the contract. This commission is going to be substantial. When the bonus landed in my account, I felt a surge of excitement I hadn't experienced in months. For once, I decided to do something for myself instead of saving it for Melissa's next emergency. I'd been driving my Honda Accord for 7 years, and while it was reliable, I'd always dreamed of something a bit nicer. The following Saturday, I visited 3 dealerships and test drove half a dozen cars. By the end of the day, I was the proud owner of a silver Audi A4. Not the flashiest car on the lot, but definitely an upgrade from my Honda. As I drove it home, I felt proud. This was the result of my hard work and dedication. Then I thought about Melissa. Her car was a 15-year-old Toyota with over 200,000 miles on it. She constantly complained about it, how it made weird noises, how the air conditioning barely worked, how embarrassed the boys were to be seen in it. My perfectly good Honda would be a huge improvement for her. The next family dinner rolled around quickly. I deliberately drove the Honda, planning to surprise Melissa. When I arrived at my parents' house, I heard her voice before I even opened the door. And then Jenny had the nerve to ask me to cover her shift on Saturday. I told her, I have children, you know. I can't just drop everything because you want to go to a concert. And she said, other single moms at work manage just fine. Can you believe that? My parents were nodding sympathetically as I walked in. Mom patted Melissa's hand. Some people just don't understand how hard you have it, dear. I bit my tongue and greeted everyone. Throughout dinner, Melissa held court with complaints about her job, her coworkers, and of course Brad. I waited patiently for a pause. Finally, as Mom served dessert, I saw my chance. I pulled the Honda keys from my pocket and slid them across the table to Melissa. I have something for you, I said, feeling genuinely excited. I bought a new car yesterday and I want you to have my Honda. It's in great shape, has low mileage, and would be perfect for taking the boys to school and activities. Instead of the smile I expected, Melissa's eyes narrowed. She picked up the keys as if they were dirty. What did you get? An Audi, I answered, my excitement fading. Nothing too fancy, just an A4. The silence that followed was thick. My parents exchanged glances with Melissa, a whole unspoken conversation happening between them. An Audi, Melissa repeated, dropping the keys onto the table with a clatter. While I can barely afford groceries, you're out buying luxury cars? It's not a luxury car, I defended. And I'm giving you my Honda. It's worth at least $10,000. Melissa stood up abruptly, kicking the keys across the floor. I don't want your hand-me-downs. If you had any real concern for me and the boys, you would have given us the new car. I was stunned. You expect me to give you a brand new Audi? Why not? What do you need it for? To impress clients? To feel important? I'm struggling to keep my children clothed and fed. I looked at my parents, silently pleading for them to intervene, to point out how unreasonable she was being. Instead, Dad cleared his throat and said, Chloe, maybe you should have consulted us before making such a large purchase. Consulted you? I repeated, not believing my ears. Mom nodded. If you have enough money for a new Audi, perhaps that money could have been better spent helping your sister get back on her feet. But since you've already bought a new car, give it to Melissa. Something inside me snapped. I slammed my hand on the table, making everyone jump. The dessert plates rattled and Tyler's glass of milk spilled. It's my money, I said, my voice shaking with fury. I worked for it. I am not obligated to support you indefinitely, Melissa. I helped you because I love you, but this is ridiculous. If my Honda isn't good enough for you, then you get nothing. I stood up, walked over to where the keys had landed and picked them up. Chloe, don't be dramatic, Mom started, but I cut her off. No, I'm done. I'm not paying for the apartment anymore. I'm not sending you money for clothes or tutors or whatever else you decide you need. Figure it out yourself. As I drove home in my Honda, my reliable, paid-for Honda that apparently wasn't good enough for my sister, my phone exploded with texts and calls. I ignored them all. That night, I listed my old Honda for sale online. 3 days later, I accepted an offer slightly below what I'd hoped for, but I didn't care. I just wanted it gone. As I handed over the keys to the new owner, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with sadness. I'd driven that car for years without any problems, but in the end it had brought me nothing but grief. A week passed, then another. I drove my new Audi to work, went about my business, and tried to ignore the gnawing guilt that my family's words had planted. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I should have given Melissa the new car. Maybe I wasn't doing enough. No. I shook my head every time these thoughts crept in. I'd already done more than enough. Then came the message I'd been expecting. Rent is due tomorrow, please transfer the money. No greeting, no acknowledgement of our fight, just a demand. For the first time, I replied with a simple no. The response was immediate. My phone rang. I declined the call. It rang again. I declined again. Then came the barrage of texts. What do you mean no? Are you seriously going to make me and the boys homeless? I can't believe you're doing this to us. Mom and Dad are furious with you. I turned my phone off and went to bed early. The next morning, I woke up to 27 missed calls and over 50 text messages from Melissa and my parents. I deleted them all without reading and got ready for work. This was the first time in my adult life I'd stood up to my family, and despite the anxiety churning in my stomach, it also felt strangely freeing. That evening, the pounding on my apartment door started around 7 p.m. I knew exactly who it was. Part of me wanted to pretend I wasn't home, but I knew this confrontation was inevitable. Better to get it over with. I opened the door to find Melissa, Mom, and Dad standing there, all with identical expressions of righteous indignation. They filed in, none of them taking my offer to sit down. Mom spoke first. Chloe, this has gone far enough. Your sister needs to pay her rent tomorrow, or she'll be evicted. That's not my problem anymore, I replied, crossing my arms. Not your problem? Melissa's voice rose to a shrill pitch. You promised to help me. You said you'd pay my rent. I've been paying your rent for nearly a year, I pointed out, along with clothes for the boys, tutoring, appliances, and everything else you've asked for. I've spent thousands of dollars helping you. So what? You have the money, Melissa shouted. You bought a brand new car just last week, with my money that I earned. And when I tried to give you my perfectly good Honda, you threw it back in my face. You literally threw the keys on the floor. Because you were flaunting your new car while I'm struggling. I took a deep breath. Melissa, you're not struggling because of me. You're struggling because you refuse to get a full-time job, because you spend all your energy complaining about Brad instead of moving forward, and because you expect everyone else to solve your problems for you. We're family, Mom said, as if that explained everything. Family helps each other. I have helped for a year. But it's never enough, is it? No matter how much I give, you all act like I'm some selfish monster for having anything for myself. Because you're single with no kids. Melissa snapped. What do you even need money for? I stared at her in disbelief. To live my life. To save for my future. To enjoy the fruits of my labor. Why is that so hard to understand? Because you're being selfish. Melissa was almost screaming now. I need that money more than you do. Then earn it, I said quietly. Like I did. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Mom broke the silence. If you don't help your sister, Chloe, you're not the daughter we raised. We raised you to care about family. No, you raised me to be Melissa's ATM, I retorted. And I'm done with it. Fine, Melissa spat. Keep your precious money. But don't expect to be part of this family anymore. If being part of this family means being exploited and taken for granted, maybe that's for the best, I replied, surprised by my own calm. You'll regret this, Melissa hissed as they moved toward the door. When you're old and alone with nothing but your money, you'll regret choosing it over your family. I'm not choosing money over family, I said. I'm choosing self-respect. The door slammed behind them, and I collapsed onto my couch, exhausted but strangely peaceful. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. The guilt was still there, but it was overshadowed by the relief of finally setting boundaries. Over the next few weeks, I heard through mutual friends and relatives that Melissa had been forced to move out of her apartment. She and the boys had moved in with our parents, which seemed like the arrangement that should have happened from the start. She was still working part-time at the boutique, and our parents were effectively supporting her, just as they had expected me to do. According to my cousin Rachel, they were all telling anyone who would listen what a terrible person I was, how I'd abandoned my sister in her time of need, how I cared more about fancy cars than family, how I'd always been the selfish one. A month after our confrontation, Rachel invited me to coffee. I wanted to check on you, she said. Your parents are saying some pretty harsh things, and I wanted to hear your side. I told her everything. The year of paying Melissa's rent, the constant demands for more money, the car incident, all of it. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. You know, I've always thought Aunt Karen and Uncle Jim babied Melissa too much. Well, for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. You can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. That phrase stuck with me. It perfectly described what I'd been doing. Burning through my resources, my boundaries, my self-respect, all to keep Melissa comfortable in her victimhood. Thanks, Rachel, I said. That means a lot. As I drove home in my Audi, which I now enjoyed without guilt, I realized something important. I wasn't alone after all. My parents and sister might have turned their backs on me, but I still had people in my corner. And more importantly, I had finally chosen to stand in my own corner. 6 months passed. Summer turned to fall and fall gave way to winter. The holidays loomed, and with them, the question of what to do about family gatherings. Would I be invited? Would I want to go if I was? I hadn't spoken to my parents or Melissa since that night in my apartment, though not for lack of trying on their part. About 2 months after our confrontation, the messages started changing tone. No longer angry demands, they became guilt trips. The boys missed their aunt, Mom texted one day. Tyler asked about you at breakfast, Melissa wrote another time. I didn't respond. I knew what they were doing. Using the boys as emotional leverage. It hurt to think about my nephews, to wonder what they'd been told about why Aunt Chloe wasn't around anymore. But I couldn't cave. If I showed any weakness, any willingness to engage, I'd be right back where I started. Work continued to be my salvation. I threw myself into projects, landed new clients, and received another promotion. My bank account was healthier than it had ever been now that I wasn't supporting 2 additional households. I started taking better care of myself too. I joined a yoga class, reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during the Melissa crisis, and even went on a few dates, though nothing serious developed. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first without guilt. In early December, I ran into my nephew Tyler at the mall. He was with a friend, no sign of Melissa or Noah nearby. When he saw me, his eyes widened, and he hesitated before approaching. Aunt Chloe, he said cautiously, as if unsure I'd acknowledge him. Tyler. I gave him a warm smile. How are you, buddy? I'm okay, he said, shuffling his feet. We're living with Grandma and Grandpa now. Mom complains a lot. Noah and I share the guest room. I nodded, not wanting to say anything negative about his mother. And how's school? Good. I made the basketball team. A small smile crossed his face. Coach says I might start next game. That's fantastic. I'd love to come watch sometime, if that's okay with you. His face lit up. Really? That would be cool. Our next game is Thursday at 4:30. I made a mental note. I'll try to be there. I kept that promise. I sat in the back of the bleachers watching Tyler play. He was good, lanky and quick with natural athletic ability. When he scored his first basket, I cheered loudly, and his head turned in my direction. The smile he gave me was worth any potential awkwardness with Melissa. After the game, I waited outside, unsure if I should approach. Tyler made the decision for me, jogging over with his gym bag. You came, he said, sounding genuinely surprised. I said I would. I gestured to the parking lot. Is your mom here? He shook his head. Grandma brought me. She's waiting in the car. I followed Tyler to a familiar sedan where my mother sat in the driver's seat. When she saw me approaching with Tyler, her expression was unreadable. Hi, Mom, I said simply. When Tyler opened the passenger door, she looked at me for a long moment. Chloe, what are you doing here? I ran into Tyler at the mall. He invited me to his game. Mom's gaze softened slightly. He's getting quite good, isn't he? He's amazing, I agreed. An awkward silence fell. Tyler looked between us, clearly hoping for some kind of reconciliation. Would you like to get coffee sometime? I finally asked. Just the 2 of us. She hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that. We agreed to meet the following week. As they drove away, I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps not all bridges were permanently burned. Coffee with Mom was tense at first. We tiptoed around the issues, talking about the weather, her garden, my work. Finally, I took a deep breath and addressed the elephant in the room. I miss you and Dad, I said. And the boys. But I can't go back to how things were before. Mom stared into her coffee cup. Melissa is still struggling. I know, and I'm sorry for that. But I can't be her safety net anymore. She says you abandoned her. I shook my head. I helped her for almost a year. I paid her rent, bought clothes for the boys, paid for tutoring. I did everything I could. But she wasn't getting better, Mom. She was getting more dependent. Mom was quiet for a moment. Your father and I might have enabled that, she admitted, surprising me. We've always babied her. Even as a child, she was the fragile one, and you were the strong one. It was the first acknowledgement I'd ever heard from either of my parents that Melissa had been treated differently. Being the strong one doesn't mean I have to carry everyone else. No, Mom agreed. It doesn't. And perhaps we expected too much from you. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start. We agreed to have dinner, just the 4 of us, me, Mom, Dad, and Melissa, to try to clear the air. I was nervous but hopeful. That dinner never happened. The night before our scheduled reconciliation, Melissa told Mom she would leave the house for dinner if I was there. She was still furious that I had abandoned her and the boys, and she wasn't ready to forgive me. Instead, I had dinner with just my parents. It was stilted and uncomfortable at times, but we managed to reach a fragile understanding. They agreed to stop pressuring me to support Melissa financially, and I agreed to be more present in family gatherings when possible. She'll come around eventually, Dad said as I was leaving. She just needs more time. Maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't. I realized I was okay either way. The weight of guilt I'd carried for months had lifted. I'd done nothing wrong by setting boundaries, by refusing to be exploited. As I drove home that night, I thought about how much had changed in a year. I'd lost the unwavering support of my family, but I'd gained something more valuable: self-respect. I'd learned that helping others shouldn't come at the expense of my own well-being, that love shouldn't be conditional on financial support, and that it's possible to care deeply for someone while still saying no to their demands.